There is a particular sound a child makes when the hurt is real, and it is nothing at all like the sound they make when they only want to be carried. I had learned the difference in a place no man should learn it, on the churned ground behind a field surgeon's tent, where I had spent 2 winters holding lamps and boiling water and pressing my hands to wounds while better men than I did the cutting. A boy of 15 once gripped my sleeve there and said, in a voice gone small and honest, that his side was tearing. He was not asking to be carried. I have never forgotten the color of his face. So when I tell you that I knew, on the morning it began, that something was wrong with the young Princess Maelin, I do not mean I guessed. I mean I had heard the first quiet note of it, and my whole body had gone still around the hearing. The way a hound goes still before the rest of the house has understood there is anything to hear. My name is Corwin Vale. In those years I stood the children's corridor of the Palace of Harrogate in the Kingdom of Eldermoor, the long gallery of tall windows and worn blue carpet that ran past the nurseries and the schoolroom and the little private stair the royal children used to reach the garden. It was not a post men envied. The gate guards had the crowds and the spectacle. The guards of the state rooms had the ambassadors and the gilt. I had a corridor, 3 children, and a great deal of time to watch. I had asked for it. A man who has seen too much of the loud end of soldiering learns to want the quiet posts, and there is nothing in this world quieter or more worth the guarding than a sleeping child. The 3 of them were the whole of my charge. Princess Maelin was 9 that summer, the middle child and the brightest flame of the 3, dark-haired like her mother, the late Queen Isolde, quick to laugh, quicker to argue, forever coming to my post to inform me of some injustice done to her by her brothers or her tutors or the weather. Prince Torin was 11 and grave for his years, a boy who had decided the world was a serious business and meant to master it. Prince Bram was 6 and believed, with the whole force of his small heart, that he was a wolf. He spent a good part of each day on all fours, and I had trained myself not to smile at it while on duty, which was the hardest discipline the post ever asked of me. Their mother had been dead 4 years. Their father, King Alaric, loved them in the distracted way of a man who carries a kingdom on his back and sees his children in the gaps between its weight. And into the space the late queen had left there had come, 2 years past, the Queen Consort Morwenna, a woman of cold elegance and colder patience, who had married a crown and found 3 children attached to it like a condition she had not fully read. She was not cruel to them in any way a court could name. She was worse than cruel in a way no court could name. She was indifferent, and she dressed the indifference in the language of good sense, so that anyone who objected sounded like a fool who did not understand children. I tell you all this because it matters to what happened. A house is a body too, and I had learned to read this one. The morning it began was the 2nd day of the midsummer visit, when the palace filled with cousins and courtiers and the whole machinery of a court at play. There was to be a garden fete that afternoon, and a portrait sitting that morning that Maelin had been dreading for a week. She was to sit still in a stiff green gown, while a painter caught her likeness for the long gallery, and stillness was the one virtue the girl had never been able to counterfeit. She came to breakfast late and did not eat. That was the first note. I stood my post at the schoolroom door, where I could see the length of the little dining room through the open arch, and I watched the platters go round, and I watched Maelin push a coddled egg from one side of her plate to the other and never once lift her fork. This was not like her. She was a child who ate the way she did everything else, wholeheartedly, and when Nan Hesper, the old nurse who had raised her mother before her, leaned down and murmured something, Maelin only shook her head and pressed her hand flat against the front of her gown, low, below her ribs, in a way that made the old woman frown. "She's out of sorts about the sitting," said the Queen Consort, without looking up from her correspondence. She had a way of answering questions no one had asked. She always is. It is a great deal of fuss over sitting still for an hour, and I will not have it turned into an occasion. Maelin, eat something or do not, but stop making a display of your plate. "I'm not hungry," Maelin said, and there was something wrong with her voice too, thin, careful, as though she were speaking around something. My tummy hurts. Then eat and it will stop. I have thought a great deal in the years since about how much harm can be done by a sentence that sounds like common sense. Eat and it will stop. Half the mothers in the kingdom have said it and been right. Morwenna was not being a monster. She was being ordinary, and ordinariness, aimed at the wrong moment, can be as dangerous as malice. I felt the wrongness of it in my chest the way you feel a wrong note in a hymn, before you can name which one it was. But I was a guard. My office was to stand and watch and hold the corridor. It was not my place to cross a dining room and lay my hand on the brow of a princess and ask her where exactly it hurt. There are walls in a palace higher than any stone, and the wall between a common guardsman and the illnesses of the royal children was one of the highest. So I watched, and I said nothing, and I filed the morning away in the careful part of my mind where a soldier keeps the things that do not yet add up. The portrait sitting went badly. I heard most of it through the schoolroom wall, which shared a chimney with the little green sitting room where the painter had set his easel. I heard the painter's voice, patient and then less patient. I heard Morwenna's sharpening. I heard Maelin's, and I did not like what I heard. She was crying, and it was not the theatrical crying of a child who wants to be let off. I knew that sound too, God knows. I had a corridor full of it some weeks. It was smaller than that, and it kept catching, as though the tears were being interrupted by something more urgent than grief. She has been standing well enough all week, Morwenna was saying. Sit up, child, sit up straight. You are making that man waste his morning and mine. There is nothing wrong with you that a little discipline would not cure. It hurts to sit up, Maelin said. Everything hurts you today. It's here, Maelin said, and I imagined the small hand pressing, low and to the right now. I would learn later. It's here and it won't stop, and it's getting bigger. Enough. The word came down like a lid. And then there was the scrape of a chair and the rustle of the stiff green gown, and Morwenna's heels on the parquet, and I understood that the sitting was over, and the Queen Consort had swept out of it in the particular fury of a person who has decided that the inconvenience they are suffering is someone else's fault. She came past my post with the painter trailing behind her, apologizing to her back. She did not look at me. People of her rank rarely looked at me. I was part of the wall, and the wall does not have opinions. Have the girl put to bed until she can behave, she said, to Nan Hesper, I think, or to the heir, or to whoever in the machine of the household would carry the order onward. And I will not be troubled about it again today. There is a fete this afternoon, and I have a great deal to do. If she is well enough to make a scene, she is well enough to lie quietly in the dark and think about her manners. Then she was gone down the great stair in a rush of silk, and the corridor was quiet, and behind me, through the schoolroom wall, I could still hear Maelin crying in the small caught way that had set every old instinct in me on edge. I want to be honest about what I did next, because it is the whole hinge of the thing, and I have turned it over many times. I did nothing, not yet. I stood my post, because that is what I was, and I told myself the thing that a disciplined man tells himself 100 times a day. That it was not my place, that the nurse was with her, that children complain of their stomachs, that I was a corridor guard and not a physician, and that the surest way to be relieved of a post you value is to abandon it because you have decided you know better than the whole household about a little girl's bellyache. I told myself all of that, and I stood there. And the whole time, underneath it, the old cold note went on ringing. Because here is what a field orderly learns in the churned ground behind the tents, that the finest court physician in a warm, dry palace can forget he ever knew. Pain has a grammar. It has a shape and a direction and a way of moving, and if you have watched enough of it, you learn to read the sentence it is writing before the sick man can tell you the ending. And the sentence Maelin's pain was writing, the wrongness at breakfast, the hand pressed low, the way it hurt to sit straight, the way she said it's getting bigger and it's here, moving from the soft middle of her toward the low right of her belly. That sentence had an ending I had seen before. I had seen it end well when a good cutter reached it in time. I had seen it end the other way, when no one reached it at all, when a strong man was left to lie quietly in the dark and think about his manners while the thing inside him tore. I did not have the word for it that a physician would use, but I knew the shape of it in my hands, and the shape of it frightened me more than any drawn sword ever had, because a drawn sword you can answer, and this I could only stand outside a door and listen to. Nan Hesper came out of the sitting room a little while later with her arm around the princess, walking her slow toward the nursery. Maelin was bent a little at the middle, the way you bend when straightening pulls at something, and her face, when it turned toward me for a moment, was the wrong color, not the flush of a child who has been crying. Something grayer under the flush, a wax to the skin along the cheekbones, and a shine of sweat at the hairline though the morning was not warm. I have that color memorized. I told you, I have never forgotten it. Nan, I said. It was the first time I had spoken all morning, and my own voice sounded strange to me, too level, the way a man makes his voice level when the thing under it is not. How long has her stomach troubled her? The old woman stopped. She was no fool, Nan Hesper. She had buried a husband and raised 2 generations of this house's children, and she looked at me with the flat, clear attention of a woman who has learned that when a quiet man speaks up it is worth the hearing. Since last night, she said. She wouldn't say. I thought it was the rich food from the welcome supper. But she was up in the dark with it, and she's kept nothing down since, and now, she glanced down at the child leaning into her side and her voice dropped. Now she won't hardly straighten, Corwin, and she's warm. Warmer than she was. Where does it hurt her? Ask her to point, one finger. Maelin lifted her head. She knew me. I was the corridor, I was the constant, I was the man who had let her win at drafts more times than a fair man should, and had never once told her brothers she cried at the sad parts of stories. She trusted me the way children trust the furniture of their lives. It started here, she whispered, and touched the middle of herself around the navel. But now it's gone down there. Her finger moved slow to the low right of her belly and rested and pressed a little, and her whole face flinched at the pressing. And when I let go it's worse. When I take my hand away, it jumps. The corridor went very far away from me for a moment. Rebound. She had just described rebound tenderness to me, in the plain words of a 9-year-old, without knowing there was a name for it, or that grown physicians pressed and released a belly precisely to hear a body say that sentence. It started at the navel and it has moved to the low right, and it is worse when the pressure lifts, and she is feverish, and she is the wrong color and she cannot straighten, and it has been getting worse for the better part of a day. I was not guessing anymore. I had stopped guessing sometime around the coddled egg. I knew. And the one person in that palace with the authority to send for the kind of help she needed had just given an order that she be shut in a dark room and left alone with it until she learned some manners. I made a choice then, standing in that worn blue corridor. I did not make it with my head. My head was still reciting all the good sensible reasons a corridor guard does not interfere. I made it somewhere lower and older, in the place where the boy of 15 still gripped my sleeve. I made it in the space of one breath, and once it was made I never once, through all the long day that followed, considered unmaking it. Nan, I said, take her to her bed and lay her on her back with her knees drawn up. That will ease it a little, and do not, whatever you are told, let anyone give her anything to eat or drink until a surgeon has seen her. Not water, not a draught, nothing. Do you understand me? A surgeon, the old woman said, not a physician. She heard the word I had chosen, and she went a shade paler herself. A surgeon, I said, I'm going to fetch one. Corwin, the Queen Consort said. I heard what the Queen Consort said. I was already unslinging the weight of the long day I could feel coming, already counting stairs and doors, and the distance to the garrison gate in my head the way I had once counted the distance to cover. You raised her mother, Nan. I am asking you to trust the one guess I have ever asked you to trust. If I am wrong, I will stand for it, and they can have my post and my name for frightening the household. But if I am right, then every hour we lose to good manners is an hour we will not get back. I looked down at the child bent over her own hurt, and I made my voice gentle because she was watching me and she was frightened, and that at least I could answer. Maelin, little one, listen to me. You are not being naughty, and there is nothing wrong with your manners. You are ill, that's all, properly ill, and it is not your fault, and I am going to bring you someone who can make it stop. Will you be brave for me a while longer? Can you do that? She looked up at me with those two bright eyes in that gray-flushed face, and she said the thing that has stayed with me longer than anything else she ever said, longer than her thanks, longer than any of it. You believe me, she whispered, as though it were a marvel, as though in the whole long morning of grown people telling her she was making a display of her plate and wasting a painter's time and inventing her pain to escape a lesson. The single most astonishing thing that had happened was that one man in a red coat had crouched down and looked at where she pointed and said, I know. I believe you. You are ill and it is not your fault. I believe you, I said. Now be brave, I won't be long. And I turned and went down the corridor at the fastest pace a guard may go without breaking into the kind of run that starts a panic in a palace. And behind me, the old nurse gathered the princess up to carry her the last small distance to her bed, and the day tilted forward into everything that came after. The palace of Harrogate was, that morning, at its very worst for a man in a hurry. Every corridor was choked with the machinery of a great household preparing to be seen, footmen bearing trestles for the fete, gardeners hauling potted lemon trees across the forecourt, a small nervous army of maids polishing things that were already clean. I went through them like a man wading upstream, and I made for the one door in the palace I trusted absolutely, which was not the door of the court physician. Dr. Ambrose Quill was the physician to the royal household, and he was a good enough man in his way, but he was old and gouty, and had built his long career on the sound principle that most illnesses, left alone, get better, and the further principle that a physician who agrees with a queen keeps his post longer than one who does not. He kept his rooms warm, his opinions cautious, and his lancets, I suspected, mostly for show. If I went a Quill, Quill would come at his own pace, peer at the princess, hum and pronounce a colic or a chill, and prescribe rest and a warm posset, and the warm posset alone might finish what the illness had started, for the last thing you may safely put into a belly like the one I feared was food or drink. And then, when I argued, Quill would send a boy to ask the Queen Consort, because Quill did nothing in that house without the Queen Consort's leave, and the Queen Consort had already given her verdict from the top of the great stair. So I did not go to Quill. I went out the small east door and across the kitchen court and down the sloping lane to the garrison, where the king's soldiers were quartered, and I went to find Sella Wren. Mistress Wren was the garrison surgeon. She had learned her trade the way I had learned my scraps of it, in the field, in the churned ground, on men who would die if she was slow and live if she was quick. And she had learned it far better than I ever had, being the one who held the knife and not the lamp. We had served in the same campaign, a lifetime ago. I had carried men to her table and she had sent most of them back to me breathing. When she left the army she had not been able to leave the cutting, and the crown, which is always short of good surgeons and long on men who need mending, had settled her at the Harrogate garrison. She was perhaps 40, spare and plain and short with fools, and I would have trusted her with anything I loved. I found her in the low stone infirmary, stitching a groom's forearm where a horse had opened it. She looked up when my shadow fell across the door, took one look at my face and said, "Who's dying?" That was Sella, no greeting after 2 years, just the question that mattered. "A child," I said, "the middle Princess Maelin, 9 years old. It started at the navel last night, it's moved to the low right, it's worse on release, she's feverish, gray, can't straighten, hasn't kept anything down in a day, and it's getting worse by the hour." I had rehearsed the sentence coming down the lane, stripped it of everything but the signs, the way she would want it. "I'm not a physician, but I've seen it. Tell me I'm a fool, Sella. I'd be glad to be a fool." She had gone still over the groom's arm halfway through my recitation. She finished the last stitch without hurrying. She never hurried her hands, only her feet, tied it, and was already reaching for her roll of instruments before she answered me. "You're not a fool," she said. "You're describing a hot appendix. The little worm of gut down in the low right, when it stops up and festers, that's the very tune it plays. Navel first, then it settles down and to the right. Worse when you take the pressure off, fever, no stomach for food. In a grown man I'd give it 2 days, maybe 3 before the worst. In a child of 9 with the fever already up and a day gone." She rolled the instruments tight and buckled them and looked at me, and for once there was no shortness in her voice at all. "Hours, Corwin. If it's what you say, it is hours, not days. If that thing bursts inside her, the poison goes everywhere, and then it is not a small clean cut that saves her but a long dirty fight that mostly doesn't. We want to reach it before it bursts. Where is she?" "Her bed." I told the nurse, "Nothing to eat or drink, knees up." "Good man." She was moving now, snatching a satchel, calling to her orderly for hot water and clean linen to follow her up. "That nurse of yours may have bought us an hour. Come on. And Corwin," she stopped in the doorway, and I saw her measure the thing that neither of us had said. "Whose leave do we have for this? A garrison surgeon does not cut open a princess of the blood on a guardsman's say-so. Where's the king?" "Gone north to the assize. Back tonight, they say, or tomorrow." "And the Queen Consort?" I did not answer at once, and that was answer enough. Sella Wren had been at the garrison 2 years. She had heard what everyone at the garrison had heard about the Queen Consort and the late Queen's children. Her mouth went to a thin line. "So we are doing this," she said slowly, "without the king and against the wishes of the one royal person presently in the house. Do you understand what you are asking me to walk into, guardsman?" "I understand exactly what I'm asking," I said. "I'm asking you to save a child's life and let the 2 of us worry about our places afterward. If it costs me my post, I'll dig ditches. If it costs you yours, you'll cut better ditch diggers' arms than any surgeon in the realm." "But she is 9, Sella, and she is bent double in a dark room because a woman who does not love her decided she was being dramatic, and I will not go back up that lane and stand in my corridor and listen to her through a wall. I have done that once already today, and I will carry it the rest of my life." She looked at me a moment longer. Then something in her face settled, the way a good soldier's face settles when the arguing is over and only the doing is left. "Then we'd best not waste the hour the nurse bought us," she said. "Walk fast." We walked fast. We came up through the kitchen court, and in by the east door and up the servants' stair, Sella's orderly panting behind us with a covered pail of steaming water and an armful of linen. And we drew every eye we passed, because there is nothing in a palace that travels faster than the sight of a grim-faced guard and a surgeon with her instrument roll moving at speed toward the family wing. By the time we reached the children's corridor, the news had outrun us. A knot of servants had gathered at the far end, murmuring, and standing square in the middle of the worn blue carpet, directly before the door of the princess's bedchamber, with her arms folded and her chin lifted, and the whole cold architecture of her authority arranged against us, was the Queen Consort Morwenna. She had heard. Of course she had heard. A palace is a body, and I had set a nerve twitching in it, and the twitch had run straight to the one place I least wanted it to reach. "Guardsman Vale," she said. Her voice was very quiet, which was how I first understood how angry she was. "You have been busy. I gave an order not 2 hours ago that I was not to be troubled about the child again today. And here you are, troubling the entire household about her, dragging." Her eyes went to Sella and traveled down her plain garrison coat and her scarred hands and her roll of knives with an expression that would have curdled milk. "Dragging some army bone-setter up my stairs to frighten my servants. Explain yourself, and choose your words with great care, because I promise you they are the last ones you will speak in the service of this house." The corridor had gone still around us. The servants at the far end had stopped their murmuring. Sella stood at my shoulder and said nothing. It was not her fight yet, and she knew it, and she was a soldier and knew whose ground this was. It was mine. I had made the choice in the corridor 2 hours ago, and now the corridor had come to collect. I did not fold my arms. I did not raise my chin to match hers. I have found, over a life of standing before angry, powerful people, that meeting arrogance with arrogance only gives it something to push against. I stood at ease, the way a guard stands, and I kept my voice level and low and respectful, and I told her the truth. Your Majesty, the Princess Maelin has an inflammation low in her belly that a surgeon must see within the hour, or she may die of it before the king comes home. I am not guessing. I have seen this illness in the field. Mistress Wren has confirmed it from the signs. I take the whole weight of the trespass on myself. Punish me however you see fit, after she is seen. But I will not stand aside from this door until a surgeon has looked at that child. And if your Majesty commands me away from it, I must, for the first time in my service, refuse an order and answer for it to the king. For a moment, one moment, I thought I saw something move behind Morwenna's eyes. Not warmth. I will not pretend there was warmth. But a flicker of doubt, perhaps, the first draft of the thought that if the child truly were dying and it came out that she had stood in this corridor and forbidden the surgeon, no amount of cold elegance would save her from the king's face when he learned of it. If she had let that flicker grow, the rest of the day would have been a shorter and a gentler story. She did not. She had built her whole self on the principle that she was never wrong, and a person like that will risk a great deal rather than admit that a guardsman read a child's body more truly than she did. She lifted her chin another degree. You forget yourself entirely, she said. The child is having a tantrum, as she has had 100 tantrums, and you, a corridor guard with a soldier's taste for drama, have decided to make yourself important by turning a girl's sulk into a deathbed. I have raised no children of my own, guardsman, but I was one, and I know precisely what a 9-year-old will manufacture to escape an hour of sitting still. You will send this woman back to her garrison, you will return to your post, and this household will trouble itself no further about a bellyache. She turned her head a fraction toward the gathered servants. Dr. Quill is even now being sent for. He is the physician to this house, and he, not some campaign butcher, will look at the child at a civilized hour and confirm what I already know. There, you see, I am not without care. Now stand aside from that door. And there it was, the reasonable-sounding trap, the middle path that was really no path at all. Dr. Quill, later, at a civilized hour. A physician who would agree with her, arriving too slow to confirm a diagnosis of nothing. It had the shape of a compromise and the substance of a grave. I did not stand aside. Your Majesty, I said, I will answer for standing here to the king, to the whole court, to God if it comes to it. But I will not move, and every minute we spend in this corridor is a minute that child does not have to spare. I turned my head just slightly and pitched my voice to carry down the corridor to the servants, because I had understood something in that moment that Morwenna, for all her cold cleverness, had not. A standoff in an empty corridor is a private matter, but a standoff before a dozen witnesses is a matter of record, and there was one person I could summon whose word would outweigh even hers. You, I said to the nearest footman, a lad of perhaps 17 frozen white against the wall. Run. Find His Highness the Crown Prince. Tell him his sister is gravely ill and that a surgeon is being kept from her. Run now and do not stop for anyone. The boy looked from me to the Queen Consort, caught in the oldest terror of the servant, which fury to obey, and Morwenna opened her mouth to freeze him where he stood. But the old nurse got there first. Nan Hesper had opened the bedchamber door behind Morwenna. I do not know how long she had been standing in it, listening, and now she stepped out into the corridor with the particular authority of a very old woman who has stopped being afraid of anything a court can do to her, and she said, in a voice that cut clean through the Queen Consort's, "The child's fever is climbing, and she has just been sick again, and there is nothing left in her to be sick, and she is calling for her mother, God rest her. If you great people mean to hold a debate in this corridor, hold it. But someone had best be brave enough to tell the king, when he comes home tonight, exactly who was standing between his daughter and a surgeon while she cried out for her dead mother. She fixed her flat old eyes on the frozen footman. Run, boy. I raised the crown prince too. He'll want to know. The boy ran. I have seen brave things done by armed men on hard ground, and I count that old woman's few sentences among the bravest, for she had no weapon and no rank and no protection at all except a lifetime's moral standing in that house, and she spent all of it freely, in one breath, for a child who was not even hers by blood. Morwenna rounded on her, and for a moment the two women faced each other across the worn blue carpet, the crown and the nurse, and the crown could find nothing to say that would not sound, before all those witnesses, like exactly what it was. It did not take the crown prince long to come. Rowan was 19 that summer, and he was in the forecourt seeing to the fete arrangements in his father's absence, and he came up the great stair 3 at a time with the footman gasping behind him and his good coat half unbuttoned. He was a serious young man, much like his brother Torrin would grow to be, and he had loved his mother, the late queen, with a fierce, quiet grief that 4 years had banked but not put out, and he loved his little sister, who had her mother's dark hair and her mother's laugh, more than he loved anything else living. He came into that corridor already afraid, and he took it in with one sweep of his eyes, the surgeon with her knives, the guard planted before the door, the servants pressed to the walls, his stepmother's cold fury, the old nurse's grim face, and he did the thing that told me in that instant exactly what kind of king he would one day be. He did not ask what the argument was about. He did not ask who was right. He crossed straight to the bedchamber door past all of us, and he said, "Where is my sister?" And it was not a question. "Highness," Morwenna began. "Where is my sister?" He had already opened the door. I saw past his shoulder into the dim room, the drawn curtains, the small shape on the bed with its knees pulled up, the sheen of fever on the gray little face, and I saw the boy's whole body change when he saw it too. He had been raised in a court. He had seen sickness dressed up and sickness denied. He knew the real thing when it was in front of him, and the real thing was in front of him now. He turned back to the corridor, and when he spoke his voice had gone very quiet and very cold, older than 19. "How long has she looked like this?" "Since the night, Highness," said Nan Hesper, "and getting worse the whole day. And a surgeon has been standing in this corridor." His eyes went to Sella, to her instrument roll, to the pail of steaming water. "How long?" "Long enough, Highness," Sella said evenly, "that I would very much like to stop standing in it." Rowan looked at Morwenna. I will not soon forget the look. There was no shouting in it. There was something worse than shouting, the exact moment a young man stops being a boy who defers to his father's wife and becomes a prince who has measured her and found her wanting. "My father left the household in my charge while he is at the assize," he said. "So I will give the order, and it will be mine, and Her Majesty may take her objection to the king tonight if she wishes." He stepped back and swept his arm toward the open door. "Mistress, see my sister. Now, whatever you need this house will give you. Guardsman, you stood your ground. Stand it a little longer. No one but the surgeon and the nurse goes through that door until she says otherwise." "Yes, Highness." Morwenna made one last attempt. "Rowan, you are a boy playing at authority, and when your father learns you let a garrison butcher loose on a princess over a fit of temper." "Then my father will have 2 of us to be angry with," Rowan said, "for I would far rather be wrong and have called a surgeon than be right and have called none. Madam, I have loved you for my father's sake as well as I was able. Do not make me choose today between you and my sister, because you will not like which way I choose." He turned his back on her, the gravest thing a prince can do to a queen, and he did it deliberately before the whole corridor, and he followed Sella Wren into his sister's room. I closed the door behind them and set my back against it, and I did not move, and Morwenna, after a long and terrible silence, gathered her skirts and swept away down the great stair to compose the version of the day she would give the king. The corridor emptied slowly. Nan Hesper went in to help the surgeon. I stood at the door and listened to what I could hear through it, which was not much. Sella's low voice, gentle in a way I had never heard her use on a grown man, asking the princess to show her where, asking her to breathe, asking her to be brave. And Maelin's small answers, and one thin cry quickly hushed when the surgeon's careful hands found the low right of her belly and pressed and, worse, released. Then Sella came out. She shut the door softly behind her and drew me a little apart, and Rowan came with her, his face gray now too, and she gave us the truth the way she always gave it, whole and plain. It is what Corwin said, a hot appendix well along. The belly is rigid low on the right and she cries out on release. The fever is high and climbing, her pulse is quick and thin. It has not burst. I am nearly sure it has not burst yet, because the pain and the rigidness are still in the one place and not spread through the whole belly. But it is close, and nearly sure is the best honesty I can give you. It must come out. Tonight. There is no draft and no poultice and no waiting for a civilized hour that will mend this. The only thing that mends it is a knife, in a clean room with a steady hand and good light, and reaching the thing before it bursts. She looked at Rowan, and then at me, and she did not soften it, because softening it would have been a lie, and Sella did not lie to the people she was about to ask for courage. It is a grave operation on a small child, and I will not stand here and promise you she lives. Children are strong, stronger than grown men in this, often, and she is a fighter. I can see that in her already. If we reach it before it bursts, her chances are good, truly good. But I need 3 things, and I need them within the hour. I need the king's leave or the crown prince's in a form no one can afterward deny. I need a clean, bright room, warm, with a strong table, and every soul kept out of it but the 2 I choose to help me. And I need Dr. Quill's key to the physician's stores, because there are things in that locked cabinet. The sleeping draught that lets me work without her feeling it, above all, that I cannot do this safely without, and Quill will not give them up to a garrison surgeon without a fight. You have my leave, Rowan said at once. Written, sealed, witnessed, whatever the law wants. I will fetch my father's own secretary and we will have it done properly in 10 minutes. And if my father disowns me for it tonight, then I was a prince for one good day. The room you shall have. Take my mother's old morning room. It has the best north light in the palace and a good oak table, and it locks. As for Quill, I said, leave Quill to me. For I had realized, standing at that door, that the last obstacle between Sella Wren and the child's life was neither the Queen Consort nor the law, but a frightened old physician with a key on his belt, and a lifetime's habit of never, ever acting without leave from above, and that this, at least, was an obstacle I knew how to move. Rowan went to fetch the secretary and the seal. Nan Hesper went to make ready the late Queen's morning room, and I heard her calling maids to it, ordering the curtains flung wide to the north light and the great table scrubbed and the fire built up. Sella went back to the princess to sit with her and watch the fever and count the pulse, because a surgeon who is about to fight for a life does not leave the ground before the battle if she can help it. And I went to find Dr. Quill. I found him being led up the great stair by 2 of the Queen Consort's own women, and I understood at once that Morwenna had gotten to him first. Of course she had. She could not stop the crown prince, but she could still shape the physician, and she had sent for Quill and filled his old ears with her version before I ever reached him. A hysterical child, a dramatic guardsman, a garrison butcher, an overwrought young prince who ought to be humored and gently overruled by the calm authority of the household's proper doctor. Quill came up the stairs rehearsing his soothing speech. I could see it on his face. He meant to arrive, and hum, and pat the air and pronounce a colic and restore good order, and be thanked by the Queen Consort for his sense. "Ah, Vale," he said when he saw me, and his voice already had the round, reassuring, nothing is the matter tone that I had come to distrust more than any shout. A great deal of excitement over a little girl's upset stomach, I hear. These things do run away with a household. Let us all take a breath, shall we? And Dr. Quill, I said. How many cases of a festered appendix have you seen open a belly and kill a person? He stopped. The soothing tone faltered. Whatever he had expected a corridor guard to say, it was not that. Well, it is not a common, one does not often. I have seen 4, I said. This was true. 3 in the field and 1 a farmer near my mother's village. 2 died because no one reached them in time, and I held the lamp while a surgeon lost them. And I will not describe to you what that death is, except to say that it is slow and it is filthy and it takes days. And a 9-year-old girl is in that bed right now with the very first act of it written all over her body. The navel pain settled down, and to the right the fever, the rigidness, the cry on release. You are a physician. You know that grammar as well as I do. You learned it before I was born. Go in and lay your own hand on her belly, low and to the right, and press and let go, and watch her face. Do that one thing, and then tell me it is a colic, and I will go back to my post and never trouble you again. He looked at me for a long moment, and I watched the physician in him war with the courtier in him, the old knowledge against the old habit. Then God bless the man, for there was a real doctor buried under all that caution after all. He set down his soothing speech, and he went into the room, and he laid his hand on the princess's belly, low and to the right, and he pressed, and he let go, and he watched her face. And when he came out again he was a different color, and his hands were not quite steady, and the courtier had gone out of him entirely. Dear God, he said quietly, the child is very ill. Why was I not told at once? Why was I told? He stopped himself, because he knew very well what he had been told and by whom, and he was too honest at the last to hide behind it. Mistress Wren means to operate within the hour before it bursts. She needs the sleeping draught from your stores and the good spirits for cleaning and whatever else she names. Dr. Quill, she is the better surgeon and you know it, and there is no shame in a man who mends fevers stepping back for a woman who has cut 100 bellies on hard ground. But she cannot do it without your key. Will you give it to her? Will you stand with us? The old man drew himself up, and for the first time since I had known him, there was something almost soldierly in the set of his shoulders. I will give her the key, he said, and I will give her my hands as well, if she will have an old physician to fetch and hold and count a pulse, for I find I do not care to be remembered as the doctor who stood in a corridor and quibbled while this house lost its brightest child. Lead me to her, guardsman, and someone had better send hard riders north to bring the king home tonight, for whatever way this ends, he must be here. So it was done. Rowan came back with the king's secretary and a sheet of vellum, and the leave was written out and sealed and witnessed by the secretary, the physician, the nurse, and myself, so that no one, not Morwenna, not any later court, could ever say the surgeon had cut a princess without lawful warrant. Quill's stores were opened. The late queen's morning room, flung wide to the cool clean north light, was scrubbed and scoured and made ready, the great oak table draped in boiled linen, the fire built high to keep the room warm, the good spirits set out, the instruments laid in ranks that Sella arranged herself with the tenderness other people give to holy things. Riders went north at the gallop to fetch the king, and through it all Maelin lay in her bed under Nan Hesper's hand, and grew, hour by hour, no better. It was the middle of the afternoon when the false dawn came, and it very nearly killed her. I was standing my chosen post outside the morning room door. Rowan had asked me to hold that ground, and there was no ground in the world I would rather have held, when Nan Hesper came hurrying from the bedchamber with a light in her old face that stopped my heart, because I did not trust it. She's easier, the nurse said. Corwin, praise be, she's easier. The pain's gone off her all of a sudden. She stopped crying. She says it hardly hurts at all now. She's asking for water and asking after her wolf brother Bram. The fever's still up, but the pain's gone soft. Perhaps it's passing on its own after all, and there'll be no need for the... I did not stay to hear the end. I was already through the bedchamber door. Sella was there ahead of me, and one look at her face told me she had understood it too, and that it was the opposite of good news. She was bent over the child with her hand spread flat and light across the whole of the little belly, not pressing now, only feeling, and her eyes, when they came up to mine, were the grimmest I had seen them all day. The pain went off suddenly, she said, low and fast for me alone. All at once. You know what that can mean. It burst, I said. It may have burst. When the swollen thing finally tears, the pressure in it releases, and for a little while, an hour, too, the sharp local pain eases and the poor soul feels better, and every fool in the room says, thank God, it's passing. And it is not passing. It is the worst moment of the whole illness wearing the face of the best. The poison is loose in her belly now, and in a little while it will announce itself, and by then it is a far harder fight. Or she made herself say the other half because she was honest even in terror, or it has not burst, and it is only the fever confusing the pain, and I am about to cut open a child who might have mended. I cannot know which from the outside. But Corwin, if I wait to find out and it has burst, every minute I wait she loses. And if I open her and find it whole, then I have taken out a thing that was going to burst anyway within the day, and I have saved her the bursting. There is only one choice that is wrong in both cases, and that is to stand here and hope. Then don't stand here and hope, I said. No, she said, I don't intend to. She straightened and turned, and her voice changed entirely, snapping into the flat command of the field. Nan, no water, I don't care what she asks, not a drop. Dr. Quill, the draft, we go now, not in an hour now. Corwin, carry her to the table yourself, gently keep her knees up, don't let her twist. And someone tell the crown prince his sister goes under the knife within the quarter hour, and it will be the longest quarter hour of that boy's life, and he had best find somewhere to spend it that is not this door. And the false dawn, which had lasted the length of a single hopeful sentence from a good old woman, was over, and I lifted the Princess Maelin from her bed as gently as I have ever lifted anything in my life, and she was so light, so terribly light, and she looked up at me with those fevered eyes and she said, "It stopped hurting, Corwin. Does that mean I'm better?" And I could not lie to her. I had promised her, without words in the corridor that morning, that I would be the one grown person in that palace who told her the truth, so I said, "It means the clever surgeon is going to make you properly better now, and I am going to carry you to her, and I am going to be right outside the door the whole time, close enough that if you call out I will hear you. You've been so brave. Be brave a little longer, little one. This is the last hard part." "Will it hurt?" "No," I said, and that at least was a truth I could give her whole. "You'll sleep, and it will be over when you wake, and I'll be there when you wake. I promise you. I'll be there." I carried her into the bright clean room where her mother had once done her morning letters, and I laid her on the linen-draped table under the good north light, and Sella Wren bent over her with the sleeping draught and a voice like a lullaby, and I bent and kissed the child's hot forehead once. A guardsman does not kiss a princess. There is no protocol in the world that permits it, and I have never for one instant regretted it. And then I made myself walk out of that room and take up my post at the door and pull it shut, and I set my back against it, and I began the longest wait of my life. I have stood many watches. I have stood through nights on hard ground when I did not know if the dawn would bring a battle or a burial. But I had never stood a watch like that one, on the wrong side of a door, with my whole heart on the far side of it and nothing to do with my hands. The corridor filled slowly, and then it filled entirely, and it filled with the family. Rowan came and could not be persuaded to leave. He stood across from me with his back against the opposite wall, and his arms folded tight across himself. A boy again now that the deciding was done, and only the enduring was left, and every little while a sound would come through the door, Sella's voice asking for more light, the clink of an instrument set down, Quill's old voice counting a pulse in a steady undertone, and Rowan would flinch as though the sound had touched him. The Princess Alara came, Rowan's young wife, gentle and frightened, and she took his hand and neither of them spoke. And then the children came, because you cannot keep children away from the door behind which their sister has gone. Torin came grave and white and stood very straight beside his brother as though standing straight were a thing he could do to help. And little Bram came on 2 feet for once, not his wolf's 4, holding tight to Nan Hesper's skirt and asking in a small voice whether Maelin was going to be all right, and no one could answer him. And at last I crouched down to his height, which I was not sure a guard on duty was permitted to do and did not care, and I said, "The cleverest surgeon in the kingdom is helping her right now, and your big brother and I are both standing guard, and we are not going anywhere. That is 3 of the best guards a girl could have. You may stand guard too, if you like. That's a good strong wolf we could use at this door." And the boy came and stood against my side, and put his small hand on the wall beside my knee as though to hold the door up, and it steadied him, and it steadied me more than I will admit. Time in that corridor did not move the way time moves. I marked it by the light on the wall, the slow slide of the afternoon across the worn blue carpet. I marked it by the sounds through the door which I had trained myself over a lifetime to read, and I read them, God help me, the whole time, the way a man cannot help reading a language he knows. I heard the moment the pace of Sella's voice changed and quickened, and my stomach dropped, and then I heard it steady again and I let myself breathe. I heard her say a word to Quill, sharp and low, and heard the old man answer, and heard the particular quality of a silence that means a surgeon has reached the thing she came for and is looking at it with her own eyes at last. I did not know then what she was seeing. I learned it after. She told me after that when she opened the low right of the belly she found the appendix swollen and dark and angry, and at the very lip of bursting. Not yet spilled, but so near it that a single one of the hours we had wasted in the corridor that morning, one more hour of later, at a civilized hour, and it would have gone, and the story would have had the other ending. The sudden easing of the pain had not been the bursting after all. It had been the fever and the exhaustion muddling the child's own sense of it, the cruelest possible coincidence, a false alarm inside a true one. Sella had cut open a princess on the strength of a fear that turned out to be a hair too early, and being a hair too early had saved the girl's life, because a hair too late would have lost it. She took the diseased thing out whole. She cleaned and she closed. And somewhere in the long middle of that afternoon, on the far side of a door with a wolf cub's hand pressed to the wall beside my knee, the worst of it passed, and none of us on the outside knew. The door opened at last. Sella Wren came out of it wiping her hands on a cloth, and her sleeves were rolled and her face was gray with the particular exhaustion of a surgeon who has spent everything she had. And for one endless instant I could not read her, and neither could Rowan, and the whole corridor stopped breathing. Then she smiled. It was a small, tired, crooked smile, and it was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen on a human face. "She's asleep," Sella said. "She came through it. The thing was out before it burst, only barely, but before. And she is young and she is strong and she fought me the whole way like the little soldier she is." She let the cloth drop and she put her hand briefly, hard, on Rowan's shoulder, prince or no prince, one frightened person steadying another. "I will not lie to you, Highness, because I have not lied to you all day and I will not start now. The next 3 or 4 days matter. There is always a danger of fever after, of the wound souring, and we will watch her hour by hour and I will not call her safe until she has eaten and stood and the fever is gone for good. But she has every chance, and they are good chances, real ones. If you had let it go till tonight, till the king came home, till a civilized hour," she stopped and shook her head once and did not finish, because the end of that sentence was in the room behind her and none of us needed it said. "You didn't. That's all that matters now. You didn't." Bram tugged at my coat. "Is Maelin all right?" he whispered. "Did the wolf guard help?" And I said, "The wolf guard helped, and Maelin is asleep and getting better, and you did that, all of you, every one of you at this door." And the boy's whole face crumpled with relief, and he burst into the loud, honest tears of a 6-year-old. And Alara gathered him up, and Torin turned his grave face to the wall so that no one would see an 11-year-old prince cry, and I let him keep that dignity and did not look at him. And Rowan pressed the heels of his hands to his eyes, and breathed like a man who has set down a weight he thought would break him. And it was into that corridor, the surgeon grey with spent effort, the children weeping, the young prince undone, the old physician sagging against the doorframe, and one guardsman standing his post with his eyes stinging in a way that had nothing to do with discipline, that King Alaric came home. They had reached him on the north road with the rider's hard-ridden news, and he had turned his horse and galloped the whole way back, and he came up the great stair still in his riding dirt, mud to the knee, his face a mask of the terror only a parent knows, and he came into that corridor braced for the worst, for he had ridden 30 miles imagining it. He saw the crowd at the door. He saw the surgeon's spent face. And he stopped, and he could not make himself ask, and it was Rowan who crossed to his father and gripped his arms and said, "She lives, father. She's asleep. The surgeon took the sickness out of her in time, and she lives." And I watched the King of Eldermoor, who had ridden home to bury a daughter, take the words into himself and nearly go down under the weight of them, the good weight this time, and Rowan held him up. He wanted to see her. Sella let him in for one moment, no more, and I stood at the door and saw the king kneel by the low bed where his daughter slept, pale and small and breathing, the fever flush gone soft into ordinary sleep, and I saw him take her limp little hand in both of his mud-stained ones and bow his head over it and stay there, not speaking, for as long as the surgeon would allow. Then Sella touched his shoulder gently, and he rose and let himself be led back out, because even a king obeys the surgeon in the surgeon's own hour, and the door was closed again on the sleeping child, and the king turned to the corridor full of people and said, in a voice not entirely his own, "Now, tell me all of it, from the beginning. Leave nothing out and spare no one, least of all if he has earned it, spare no one." And so it was told. Rowan told his part, and Quill told his, honestly, including his own first caution and the shame of it, and Nan Hesper told hers in her flat, old, fearless voice, and Sella Wren told the plain surgeon's truth of the illness and how near it had run. And they told him, all of them, where the thread of it began. Not with the surgeon, and not with the crown prince, and not with the physician, but with a corridor guard who had heard a wrong note over a coddled egg at breakfast, and had not been able to stop hearing it, and who had crossed every wall in the palace, and refused a queen to her face before a dozen witnesses, and gone down the lane at a dead pace to fetch the one surgeon in the realm he trusted, all on the strength of a child's finger pointing at the low right of her own belly, and saying, "When I take my hand away, it jumps." The king listened to the whole of it in silence, and when it was done, he turned and looked at me for a long time, and I stood at attention under that look and waited to learn what it would cost me, for I had refused his wife's direct order, and I was ready to answer for it, as I had told her I would be. But before the king could speak, there was a stir at the head of the great stair, and the Queen Consort Morwenna came back into the corridor to give her account, not knowing, yet, how the day had ended, or how completely the ground had shifted under her while she was away composing her version of it. She swept in as she had swept out, cool and certain, already speaking. "Alaric, thank heaven you are home. You must hear the truth of this before these people fill your ears with hysteria. The child had a fit of temper over her portrait sitting, nothing more, and your guardsman here worked the whole house into a frenzy, and your son, forgive me, but he is young, let himself be stampeded into turning a garrison butcher loose on a princess of the blood, and I did what I could to hold the line of good sense against." She saw his face. She had been married to him 2 years, and she had never learned to read him well, but no one could have failed to read the face he turned on her then. She stopped. "My daughter," the king said very quietly, "had a rotten piece of her own body swelling toward bursting inside her, and if it had burst she would have died in filth and agony over 3 or 4 days, and the only reason she is asleep and breathing in that room instead is that a corridor guard and an old nurse and my 19-year-old son had the courage that you, madam, called hysteria. You held the line of good sense. You held the line, Morwenna, between my child and a surgeon, and you held it with your own body in that corridor, before all these witnesses, while she cried out for her dead mother. Do not tell me you did what you could. I have just been told in great detail exactly what you did. Morwenna's face went white, and then it went to the last resort of a certain kind of pride, which is to become the injured party. I am not a physician, Alaric. How was I to know? 100 children have tempers. No one could have known. The guard knew, the king said. The guard knew from a coddled egg and a pointing finger. The nurse knew. My son knew the moment he opened the door. The only person in this palace who looked at that gray little face and saw a tantrum was the one person in it who has never once troubled herself to know that child at all. That is not a failure of medicine, madam. Any mother's ignorance I could forgive in an instant, and gladly. It is a failure of love, and it stood in a corridor and gave orders. He drew a long breath, and when he went on his voice was steadier and somehow more terrible for it, the voice of a king and not only a father. You will not be shamed publicly. I will not do to this house what a scandal would do to it, and I will not teach my children that we answer coldness with cruelty. But you will withdraw from the family's household to your dower estate in the north, and you will keep no authority over these children again while I live, nor any voice in their care, their teaching, their persons, or their rooms. You crossed a threshold today that a man does not forgive, madam. I wish you had not. Go and make ready to leave. You will go quietly and with your dignity, which is more than you left my daughter this morning. There was nothing she could say to it. She looked around the corridor once, at the spent surgeon and the weeping children and the old nurse and the guard she had promised would never speak again in the service of this house, and she found no ally in a single face, and she understood at last that the ground was gone from under her. She gathered her skirts, and she went quietly, as she had been bidden, and with the cold dignity that was the one thing she had never lacked, and I never saw her in that palace again. It was Princess Adela, the king's sister, who arrived that evening and set the seal on the justice of it, for she was the wisest head in that house, and the king leaned on her judgment as on a staff. She heard the whole account a second time, and she went in and sat an hour by the sleeping child, and when she came out she said the thing that I have kept longer than any medal. A house is guarded at its gates by men with rifles, she said, and everyone can see them and everyone praises them. But a house is also guarded, or not, at its breakfast table, over a plate a child will not eat, by whether there is one soul present who is paying attention. Today this house was guarded at its breakfast table. See that the man who guarded it is never posted anywhere he is not thanked for it. Now I will tell you the part I have been most impatient to reach, through all of this, which is that the Princess Maelin got well. She got well slowly, as Sella had warned, and there were 2 bad nights in the middle when the fever climbed again, and the surgeon did not leave her side, and I stood a great many hours at that door that I was no longer required to stand, and would not have left for a royal command. But the fever broke on the 3rd night, and on the 4th morning she woke clear-eyed and cross and hungry, which Sella said were the 3 finest words in a surgeon's language, and she asked for bread and honey, and for her wolf brother Bram, and I was told for me. They let me in to see her on the 5th day, when she was propped up in her own bed with color in her cheeks, and a great tray of the food she had not been allowed for a week, and she was holding court over her brothers with the full restored authority of a 9-year-old, who has been to the edge of something and come back, and intends to make the most of it forever. When she saw me in the doorway she went suddenly shy, the way children do with the people who have seen them most frightened, and then she remembered herself and sat up very straight and said, with tremendous 9-year-old formality, "Guardsman Vale, I am told you carried me to the surgeon and stood outside the whole time and would not go away." "That is true, your highness," I said. "And that you told the Queen Consort no, right to her face, and got in a great deal of trouble for it." "That is also true, though it turned out to be the good sort of trouble." She considered this. Then the formality cracked all at once and she was only Maelin again, the brightest flame of the 3, and her chin wobbled and she said, "You believed me. When nobody believed me and everybody said I was being naughty, you crouched down and you looked where I pointed and you said you knew. Why? Why did you believe me when you were only the corridor guard and everybody else was so much grander and so much surer? And I gave her the truest answer I had, which was not grand at all. Because a long time ago, little one, I said, in a hard place I learned that when a body says something is wrong, the kind thing and the wise thing and very often the only thing that matters is to believe it first and ask questions after. Grand and sure are cheap. Anybody can be grand and sure. Paying attention is the whole of it. And you told me exactly what was wrong in your own plain words, better than any physician could have. You pointed right at it and you said when I take my hand away, it jumps. You saved your own life, Your Highness. I only fetched the surgeon. You did the hard part, which was to keep telling the truth about your own hurt, even when every grown person in the room told you to stop. She thought about that for a long moment in the serious way she had, so like her brother Torrin. Then she nodded once as if filing it away somewhere permanent. When I am grown, she said, I am going to remember that. When somebody tells me something hurts, I am going to believe them first and ask questions after, even if I am very grand and very sure by then. She held out her small hand to me, and I bowed over it as gravely as if she had been the king himself, and she was satisfied. The king honored me, of course, in the way kings do. There was a purse I tried to refuse and was not permitted to refuse, and a lifting of my post from the corridor to the captaincy of the family's own guard, which meant I never again stood a watch where I was not thanked for it, exactly as the Princess Adela had ordered. Sella Wren was made surgeon to the royal household in Quill's place, and old Quill, to his lasting credit, was the one who recommended her for it, saying an old man who mends fevers should know when to hand the knife to a better hand. Nan Hesper was thanked before the whole court, which embarrassed her terribly, and which she pretended to dislike and secretly treasured until the end of her days. And the letter of leave we had all signed in such haste that morning, the vellum with its 5 signatures, the guardsman's among them, the king had framed and hung in the family wing, not as a legal document but as a monument, and beneath it he had a small brass plate engraved with words I did not deserve and have never lived down, to the man who was paying attention. But that is not the part I keep. Kings give purses and captaincies, and I was grateful, but a man does not warm his old age at a purse. The part I keep is this. For years afterward, until she was grown and gone to a household of her own, the Princess Maelin waved to me every single morning. Wherever I was posted in the palace, whatever grand duty had me, she would find a moment somewhere in her days beginning to catch my eye across a courtyard or down a gallery, and she would lift her hand, not the practiced wave a princess gives a crowd, but a small private one, just between the two of us, and I would incline my head to her, and we would both remember without a word the morning she pointed at the low right of her own belly and one man in a red coat crouched down and said, "I believe you." It was the whole of our understanding, that wave. It said, "You told me the truth and I heard it." It said, "I am well and it is partly your doing." It said, "Paying attention is the whole of it and you taught me that and I have not forgotten." I have stood a great many watches in my life, at gates and at coffins and at the doors of the great, and I have been thanked and honored more than a plain man from a plain village had any right to expect. But if you ask me, an old guardsman now, my rifle long since hung up, telling this by a fire to whoever will listen, what my whole life of standing at doors was for, I will not tell you about the king's purse or the captain's post or the brass plate with its kind untrue words. I will tell you about a girl who is a grown woman now, with clever children of her own who point at their own small hurts and are believed first, before any question is asked. And I will tell you about a coddled egg pushed from one side of a plate to the other on a summer morning, and the wrong quiet note it struck, and how the whole of a life's discipline came down in the end to one thing and one thing only, that I did not stop hearing it, that when a child said her stomach was tearing apart, I believed her, and that everything good that followed, everything began there. That is what the watch was for, that and nothing grander. I would stand it all again.